Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Lyndee Cabo, welcome to the Center of the Universe. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you on because this is the third time we've scheduled you to be on. We know each other because we worked together a couple years ago, and you are now the proud mom of a 2-year-old.
I am.
And she just turned 2 recently, right?
Yes. Yesterday was her second birthday.
Oh, toddlers are so fun.
It is fun. It's funny having her. Just the different phases that children go through. It's like having a new child we're kind of at the point where she's a new person every 3 months. But like in that first year, every month she's changing and her interests change and she just develops more and more and gets a little more of a personality. And so we're definitely at the phase where it sounds funny. I feel like I know her better now that she is 2.
Well, you've been spending a lot of time with her.
Yeah. So that helps too. Maybe that's what it is.
That's so funny. Is she a terrible 2 yet or not quite yet?
No, not really. No, she's not. She's actually a really good communicator. I'm surprised at how well she speaks, and she's very talkative and intrigued by language and wants to learn new words and sometimes makes up her own words. I don't think anybody else could really understand her the way that Matt and I do because she has so many slang words, but we at least know what she's saying, and I think that alleviates some of the frustration that 2-year-olds tend to have.
Is there a fun slang word that you can share?
So she loves shoes and boots, and she can't say boots for whatever reason and doesn't try to, but she goes, brrr, and that's boots.
That's great.
I don't know if she got that from like Cardi B or like where we're picking that up, but so when she makes that noise, we know what she's looking for. But when grandparents are visiting, they're like, what is this kid doing? Is she singing? And we're like, no, she wants her snow boots.
Yeah, she's being very functional.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fun times. And what is her name?
Gwendolyn, and we call her Winnie.
Winnie. And she loves her name, you think?
I think so. So she's just started learning how to say her name in maybe the last month or so, and so she calls herself Wee Wee.
That can mean all kinds of things.
Yeah. So we didn't really think that through, and we hope.
I don't think you could see that coming.
Yeah, we're hoping kindergarten and first grade go pretty well, and everybody can pronounce it a little better. But if not, it happens. Now it's out there for posterity. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Wee Wee.
Yeah, it's all good. We will be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So where are you from? Where do you consider yourself from?
I guess I would consider myself from Virginia, although I never really felt like we were from anywhere. My dad was in the Navy since we were born, and when I was little, I was born in Florida, and then we moved to Maryland. We lived in Pennsylvania for a while when my dad was in different trainings in school, and my mom, sister, and I would live with my grandmother. And then we moved out to California, and then we moved to Virginia, and then we moved back to Florida, and then we moved to Japan, and then we moved back to Virginia. And so they were in Virginia the longest. I was there maybe 8 years, compared to all the other places were anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. But it was also a little late to feel like that was home, but not in a bad way. We'll still go to Western Pennsylvania where my parents are from, and that town, Johnstown, probably feels the most like home, although I don't know if I'd really claim that as home either.
But you have family there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents actually just moved there back in September. They had been in Virginia for the longest time. I have a brother that's 10 years younger than me, and that was definitely home for him. That was the place he lived his whole life, and so it's kind of funny being 10 years apart and how different his early childhood was from my sister and I, who were only 18 months apart.
What was your favorite place to live?
I love Japan. I don't think I appreciated it as much, but it was awesome. I think that is what really made me appreciate different cultures. I think that is what steered me professionally into interior design, and just seeing how different people function and how your home and your culture impacts your house and your life.
Did you have any appreciation for what it was like to live in the same place for a long time through your friends?
I mean, no offense to my friends, but I thought that was really weird. Like, I remember dating a kid in high school, and he had grown up in the same house, and his grandmother lived down the street, and every Sunday they ate dinner together. And, like, it sounds all ideal now that I'm a mom. Like, that's...
Did we know each other when you were a kid? Because you're describing my childhood.
And I just remember going to his grandma's house on a Sunday with them, and I just thought it was the weirdest thing. I was like, what do you mean your grandma lives down the street? And, like, these are the two houses you go to every day in your whole life? Like, ugh.
Not a lot of diversity.
No, not a lot at all. I definitely think being in a military family and not only coming and going ourselves, but having friends coming and going from different places, exposed my sister and I to a lot of different cultures, and just thoughts and things like that. So that was really cool.
Yeah, the culture in Florida is very different than Virginia, which is different than Pennsylvania, which is different than California, and certainly different than Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I could pick up on all the different nuances within the U.S., but people were different. Lifestyles were different. When we lived in California, we were super active. We were outside all the time, went to parks, went hiking and things like that. And then in Virginia, our first neighborhood was just very much a subdevelopment, and we hung out in that subdevelopment, and that was cool too. And we had great neighbors, which was the first time, like, we got close with neighborhood kids.
Yeah, it's hard to get close when you're a military brat, right?
So yeah, both have their pros and cons.
What did your dad do in the Navy?
He was an EOD.
Did he do, like, hardcore EOD missions in scary places?
I believe so. He was in the Middle East twice. We don't really talk about it.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. But he was over there. He has told us some stuff, and he's a badass, and we're pretty proud of him. I do remember one time when we lived in Japan, and he didn't come home from work one night, and I woke up the next morning, and I was too young to, like, be worried or think anything of it. And my mom was just like, all right, you guys got to go to school. I got to go get your dad from the hospital. A bomb blew up in his hand. Oh. And said it, like, very casually. And I kind of...
Bombs blowing up in hands sounds very destructive.
Yeah. And I remember even being young and being like, okay, like, better get to school. Mom's got to go. Mom's got errands to run. And I mean, luckily, he still has his hand and everything. It wasn't
catastrophic.
It wasn't catastrophic. I wouldn't say it was nothing, but yeah, I think it was a training mission that kind of had some flaws to it, and kind of part of it.
Wow,
part of the job.
That's scary. He must deal with stress and anxiety pretty well.
Yeah, he does. I don't think I've ever thought of him as an anxious person. So if he is, he hides it very well. Stressed maybe, but not any more than the average person. Just having children, working, and
doing what he was doing.
Yeah. But yeah, he is definitely a calm and confident person. One thing that's interesting about him is he can totally be wrong about something, and he will say it with such confidence that you think that it's true. And it's, I'm sure, a great tactic in the military for leadership and getting people to not be scared and to follow you into, I don't know, like buildings and things like that. And then other times it's kind of funny to look back and I was like, Dad, you have no idea what the fuck you were talking about.
My wife tells me the more confident I am, the more likely I'm going to be wrong, is what she tells me.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
She's right most of the time. Yeah. All right. So you have a sister who's 18 months older than you.
Yeah. So that's Samantha. And we call her Sam, or Sammy Pie, or Tootsie is her aunt nickname.
Those are fun names.
My grandma on my dad's side, her nickname was Tootsie, and we loved her very, very much. And so when Sam became an aunt, that was the nickname we gave to her.
The name has lived on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. What was it like growing up with an older sister?
My experience was really positive. Hers was probably a little more negative. I mean, I still love her so much. I idolize her. I just think that she is the smartest, most creative person. She's hilarious. I just still to this day when I think of her, she's way funnier than me, way cooler than me, way more creative. More interesting. She's the coolest. Yeah.
Is it because she's older or because she's also very cool regardless of her age?
A little bit of both. Definitely both. I think just being younger and having somebody close in age but that was capable of doing just a little bit more was motivating. Because anything she could do, just being a year and some change older, I was pretty close to being able to do it, but not quite. And so, that was just interesting to kind of follow her and do jumps like she jumps and like jump off of swings and like ride down hills in cardboard boxes and like, I don't know where my parents were, but, so yeah, there's a little bit of that, but Sam is an incredibly creative and interesting person. And she has a very dark sense of humor that, we both just get on a weird sisterly level. That
you both share that dark sense of humor.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite part about our friendship.
Is she in Virginia? Or
She is now. I'm so excited. So last year, before COVID, she was living out in LA, and COVID brought her to Richmond. And it was kind of one of those things, well, you're not going to work in the office. Why pay for rent in LA when you can come to Richmond? So I convinced her to come to Richmond. And actually, my brother moved at the same time. So they both came around August, September. They both were living with us for a little while, too, which... in retrospect, was a really cool opportunity because we hadn't all lived together in 10 years.
Did Matt think it was cool? Matt being your husband.
Yeah, he did to my face. I don't know if he has any different opinions now, but it is...
Sounds like he wouldn't share them if he had a different opinion.
No, Matt is far more laid back and easygoing than I am. So I don't think that he was concerned or really noticed.
Okay.
That's just Matt.
It's a pretty easy way to go through life, I think.
Yeah.
Less stress for sure.
Definitely. Our personalities are very opposite in that way, but I can't also imagine being married to someone like me. So that'd be a lot if there were like two people like that.
Sounds like a lot of energy in the room at one time, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of opinions, maybe. I don't know how much energy there is, but yeah.
We'll come back to Matt in a second.
Yeah.
And your brother is...
He will be 21 at the end of August, and we are so excited. But yeah, he has a name. He's Ethan.
I hadn't put that together.
Yeah, so okay. I'm 31, Sam's 33, and Ethan is 20, going on 21.
So your younger brother is my son's age, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have a urinal in his bathroom now.
My son's very fortunate.
Yes, yeah.
Is that the first time the urinal's been mentioned? Yeah.
No way. No, I think I heard it on a podcast.
Maybe one other time.
But then I think you hushed them. I can't remember who it was, but you're like, this isn't about me.
I should celebrate the urinal, actually.
Yeah.
It's all good. So what's your relationship like with a brother who's 10 years younger, who's not legally able to drink?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because he really has no interest in drinking. My sister and I have tried really hard with the peer pressure for maybe the last 5 years, and he doesn't have interest in it, which I think is...
It's probably better for him long term.
No, it's super cool. It's super cool. I caved to any kind of peer pressure from like 14 to, I don't know, maybe like 28. So it's cool to see him know who he is and hold his ground with what he wants to do. But he's kind of like my little baby too. I don't know if he would feel comfortable hearing that, but too bad. He is.
He is 10 years younger than you.
He is, yeah. So my dad was in the military. When we moved back from Japan, he was 2. My mom went back to work now that she was in the U.S. and could speak English and could like navigate a workplace. And my sister and I, Ethan went to daycare at the front of our neighborhood. And my sister and I, our routine was we got home off the bus. We walked to the front of the neighborhood, picked him up, brought him back from daycare in his little stroller, fed him his snack. We worked on our homework. And like he was just our little buddy. We were the weird kids in high school that had like car seats in our cars. I remember my sister being more concerned. It was obvious that he was not my child, with it just being a 10-year age gap. But something about like 12 to 13 years with Sam was kind of questionable. And I know that
I guess technically there's a chance. But
there's a chance. I think it would be close to a world record, but there's a chance.
Yeah. And most people figure it out pretty quickly once they get to know the family, right?
Yeah, I think adults figure it out quickly. I think it was mostly among our peers that I mean, nobody's smart at that age. They're like, oh, you have a kid. Of course he's in your car.
Where'd you go to high school?
In Chesapeake. I went to Great Bridge High School.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Is that where Katie went?
Yeah, so Katie and I went to high school together.
At the same, y'all are roughly the same age, right?
She was a senior when I was a freshman.
And so we just revealed Katie's age if people are following the math.
Yes. Yeah.
Did y'all know each other back then?
Yes. Ish. I knew who she was. And then I remember when she started working at the company that shall not be named.
Right.
That I got an email invitation because she joined my team. And I remember seeing her first name and her maiden name and thinking like, wow, that sounds really familiar, and not putting it together. And then she started working, her first day at work. We were both familiar to each other. I think we recognized each other's names, but not so much our faces. We had more mutual friends than we actually knew each other. And yeah, we figured it out, and then we just went through the yearbook on like who we knew and who we liked, who we didn't like, and all that fun stuff. So that was really fun at work to work with her.
Yeah, she's a great person.
She's an amazing person, like outside of if I had known her in her teen years, but it's funny.
Yeah, I'm guessing you knew of her more than she knew of you, given the fact that she was 18 and you were 15.
Yeah, she probably had no interest in like what the freshman kids were doing, but she was a model, and
she doesn't talk about that.
No, she doesn't, which is funny. Yeah, I remember her modeling. Her doing modeling was discussed in high school, because obviously if you're a model in high school, like that's what people are talking about.
Right.
So I remember hearing about her through that. And then my sister's best friend, Danny, in high school, was good friends with her. And Danny and I were good friends in high school as well, just through.
So Danny's a good connection.
Danny is a good connection. Actually, funny story about Danny. He and my sister had lost touch in their 20s. And then since Sam moved to Richmond, and then, so to backtrack, she moved to Richmond temporarily, and then she just accepted a job this past week. And so she will be staying in Richmond permanently and does not have to move back to LA or DC. So it's extra
super
exciting.
Cool, right?
And so she lives a half mile away from me, and
kind of like the kid in school, grandma lived down the street.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, exactly. So she lives right down the street, and she reconnected with Danny only to find out that he lives in the building right next to her. So we're all living within
that's crazy,
like a half a mile of each other. So
that's awesome, right?
Yeah, it's so cool.
That's very cool. I have to ask the question about your height versus your husband Matt's height.
Yeah. So he's 5'1" and I'm 6'6", and so
flip that.
Yeah.
That would be amazing if it was flipped though.
Yeah, that would. That definitely would. So I'm 5'1" and he is 6'6". And then honestly, the funny thing about that is I don't think that we would have met and gotten married if we had a normal height difference. So we were working at the same restaurant in Virginia Beach. I worked on the formal side, and then there was an informal like pier side that was on one of the piers down there. And I remember the first time I saw him when I started working there, and he was walking through a doorway, and I just kept staring at him, waiting to see if he would clear the doorway or not.
I'd stare at people that tall too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's like my first memory of him. And he says that his first memory was pretty similar, where he saw me at work and was like, wow, that's like a really small person. And then we never spoke to each other. And then I had his best friend became a good friend of mine, and he was working with me on the formal side, and we would hang out and go get drinks and stuff after work. And he told me one day that Matt had a really big crush on me, but he was shy, and he didn't know how to talk to me, and that I should talk to Matt. And then I guess he told Matt the same story. Neither of us had any interest in the other person. Yeah,
This guy was just instigating.
he was a total instigator. He's a very odd person. He's hilarious, but just kind of a weird dude, to be totally honest. Sorry, Sean. And so Sean is also a nomad. Sorry, we were talking about a nomad earlier.
Yeah.
And he would stay in Virginia Beach in the summer, and then in the winter he would go out to Squaw Valley and work at the ski hills.
Right.
And so he told us that in roughly like September, October, left town. We started hanging out, and then he came back 6 months later, and we were like, hey, thanks for hooking us up and whatever. Like, good call. We have so much in common. And he had no idea what we were talking about. I think he was just drunk that night and was totally messing with us.
Just stirring stuff up.
And then, and 10 years later.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think people stare at you because of the height difference?
I used to think that they did when we first started dating, and maybe it was just, I was 21 when we met, so maybe it was just 21 and being hyper aware of just everyone and still growing into my skin at that point. But I was convinced everyone was staring at us and thought that it was weird. I was telling you earlier, when we would go to Target or Walmart or whatever and grocery shop together, I perceived everybody as just staring at us and thinking that we looked goofy. But middle schoolers would flock to Matt. Matt had a very impressive sneaker collection at the time, and was also tall, and so that's like 2 cool points for Matt.
At least 2 cool points.
At least, yeah. So middle schoolers, like early high schoolers, would always stop us, ask him where he got his sneakers, what kind they were, and blah blah blah. I didn't know sneakers had names, and then they would ask him if he played basketball, and he actually still gets that question a lot. And then I have an uncle who is maybe a little bit taller than me, and his joke with Matt is everyone always asks Matt if he plays basketball, and my uncle's mad that nobody asks him if he's a jockey. So that's their little joke.
Yeah, so you're not self-conscious about it anymore, I'm guessing.
No.
Not
really.
I forgot how much taller I am than my wife.
You just kind of get used to it.
Yeah, your height gap's 17 inches with Matt. With my wife, it's 14 inches, and I'd forgotten about the height difference many years ago. And a few months ago, I was telling you before the recording, she's like, she saw another couple. The wife was really short, and the husband was really tall, and she's like, "Do we look like that?" I'm like, "Probably, but I don't care. I'm totally accustomed to it now."
Yeah. Yeah, no, we definitely we'll see other couples. We're like, wow, they look goofy, and then we realize, shit.
Oh, that's kind of us. Yeah. How old were you when your dad got out of the Navy?
I was 21. That was one of my first dates with Matt. That was his retirement party. Was the first time Matt had met my entire family.
How long had you been dating?
Maybe a month and a half.
Oh, that's a lot after a month and a half.
Yeah, but back to being like 21 and not thinking things through properly. It sounded like a totally great idea.
Matt was overwhelmed.
I'm sure that he was, because it was my entire family. My grandma, aunts, uncles, cousins. Yeah.
It's your dad's retirement from the Navy. Everybody's showing up.
Everyone's there. Yeah. And then Matt's a little bit older, so he's 20. He was 25 when we started dating. But yeah, we still have a picture of him and all my cousins, and we're standing around drinking a beer, and the top of Matt's head is cut out of the picture, and then the beer in his hand looks like a beer for children. It just
looks like a 3-ounce can.
Yeah, it looks like one of those little mini Coors.
So your dad was still in the Navy when you were in high school.
Yes.
And your teenage years, were they Pretty stereotypical, pretty easy? Were you an easy teenager?
No. So my sister was an easy teenager in the sense that she did her homework, was incredibly smart, didn't have to study, just got A's. She is an amazing artist and thrived with her art in high school. I'm pretty sure she got into multiple colleges. I, on the other hand, didn't take the SATs. And
because you just said, I'm not doing it.
I'm not doing it. Although I did find a workaround, which is like a super classic Lyndee move. Anyhow, we'll get to that. But yeah, in high school, I have always been somebody that doesn't enjoy doing what I'm told to do. Now, I'll do it if somebody can explain the logic behind it and it makes sense why we're doing these things.
I'm not going to do it just because somebody else is telling me.
Yeah, exactly. And I still kind of feel that way. So homework didn't sound necessary. And although, no, I did pretty well in school. Junior, senior year, I cared a little bit less. But yeah, I definitely dabbled with drinking and maybe a little drug use here and there.
Like a lot of kids.
Like a lot of kids, yeah. I think I was just interested in learning for myself. And I learned drugs are bad, don't do drugs. But
Did you hear that, Winnie?
Yeah, Gwendolyn, put it down. But yeah, I'm sure I know I was a handful for my parents, but I think it really shaped me into who I am.
So how did you get out of the SATs? Was the idea that you weren't going to go to college?
Yeah, I didn't have interest in going to college. I'm not really sure why I didn't have interest. I think I just didn't like high school, and I was like, man, if I don't like this, I'm really not going to like college.
Right.
So I didn't take them. And when later in life, when I went to VCU, I was 23 when I went, and if you applied after you were 22, you didn't have to take the SATs. So I held off for a few months before applying to VCU.
When did you know that?
No, I didn't. No, this was like a luck thing. This was not a planning at 18. I was not that clever. This was like...
But you were that clever when you were 22.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not something somebody tells you. Probably.
No. But here's the tip. If you wait till you're 22, you don't have to take it.
I would love for my kids to wait until they were 22 or 23 to start college.
It was the best decision I ever made. So after high school, I moved around on my own. We had lived a nomad life from birth until middle school. And so it was kind of weird being in the same place for that, 7 years or whatever it was. So after graduating, I moved to Florida. I have a grandma down there, and I lived with her. And then I worked in a restaurant. And
what part of Florida?
Not the part that young people want to live in. It's called Port Charlotte. It's
okay. Yeah,
just above Fort Myers and below Tampa, so on the Gulf side. Definitely a retirement community, empties out in the summer. But I went down there in September and got a job in a restaurant, quickly met other people that were up to no good and working in restaurants. And so we all decided to get a place together. And so we lived there. And then everybody left that part of Florida in April, and restaurants were dead. And so I followed, I was dating a guy that was a part of the roommates, and he was from Minnesota. So he was going back to Minneapolis, and it sounded like a city. So it wasn't New York, but it wasn't Chesapeake. So it sounded great, and I hopped on that and went along. And that was an interesting experience. We aren't together anymore. Clearly. I met my real person. And it was a fun experience it was a totally different state. For one, everyone in Minnesota that I met was incredibly nice. So that was really cool. Everybody was very welcoming and homey and a little granola. But I think it was just everybody, you spend 8-9 months indoors. And so by the time the summer rolls around, which is when we were moving up there, everybody's out and they're so excited to see faces. It's probably pretty similar to like the pandemic wrapping up.
They're living
and
the
everything.
pandemic almost every year.
Yeah, exactly. And so everybody was just so friendly, and there was so much to do outside, and we would hang out at lakes.
Lots of lakes there in Minnesota.
Lots of lakes. So many options. And then we broke up that fall, which was convenient because it was right before the winter, and it was getting
It's great timing.
so cold. I remember September 1st in Minnesota. It was like the weather knew it turned September, and all of a sudden I woke up that day and the high was like 50 degrees.
That's silly.
And it just didn't get better from there.
Yeah, it doesn't really get warm there until late May, early June if you're lucky.
Yeah, so that year that we moved there, it had snowed. It was like May 20th or something. It had snowed there.
That's crazy.
And yeah, and that was right before we were moving, and I was definitely debating, is this the place for me? Because I am a warm weather person for sure.
Yeah, you have to not be bothered by the cold weather, and it's fairly cloudy. There's not a lot of sun there.
It definitely was cloudy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's seasonal affect disorder.
I definitely have seasonal depression. Even in Virginia, it gets kind of cold here, and
gray and cloudy.
That's not my happy place. But as soon as you get that warm weather in April, it's like, man,
yeah, April
I feel
here,
so good.
or June,
or like June to July 15th there.
Yeah, right.
It's not a very big window, but I will say their weather in the summer is amazing. It's like high of 77. It's not muggy.
It's not brutal.
You can be outside all day and not pass out.
I meant to ask this earlier. How old were you when you lived in California?
I don't know, 3 until 5.
You don't remember California.
I was in kindergarten when we left, and it was probably around 3 that we moved there.
Were you in San Diego?
No, we were in, I don't even remember. The base is no longer open, but it was near San Francisco, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you live near San Francisco, but you don't really remember. That's kind of a bummer.
No, I remember a couple of our outings that we would go to on weekends and stuff when family would come into town. But for the most part, it wasn't until Japan that we started traveling on weekends as a family. California, we played with neighbors a lot. We would go to the parks nearby, but we weren't traveling frequently. And then when we lived in Japan, I would say maybe 1 or 2 weekends a month we were on an excursion, whether we went to Tokyo or Hakone.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. It was a really cool experience. I remember being annoyed by that as a young person and just wanting to hang out with my friends at the NEX and go to the food court.
You didn't know any better.
No, I did not know any better. But Matt and I recently went back for our anniversary a couple years ago.
Oh, that's great.
It was amazing. It was a great trip. We went to Tokyo, and it was really cool walking around some of the places that I remembered going to when I was 11, 12, and seeing that. There was a place in the Emperor's Garden that we went to, and I recognized it immediately because I had a picture with my sister and my grandma there. I was
that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah,
that was pretty wild.
Do you speak Japanese at all?
No, we do like to travel a lot, and I try my very best to learn like conversational whatever
Please,
phrases.
thank you.
Yeah, before we go. That's something really important to me as a traveler. I usually spend a lot of time working on that for like a month or 2 before we go, and then I get nervous when we get there and somebody usually speaks to me in English, and then I never really use it. But
it's very endearing to attempt the home language for that country.
Yeah, I would say the Japanese are the kindest as well, where they are really accommodating just in their culture to people in the community as a whole. And so they were all very kind to speak English and practice their English with us.
When you're there, do you stand out?
So when I was younger, I did. I had very blonde hair when I was growing up and I was living there, and people would stop me and take pictures with me and want to touch my hair. That was really common.
Oh, man.
And
I don't know why I find that so funny.
Yeah, and
They wanted to touch it.
they wanted to touch my
Like it was
hair.
different.
Yes, exactly. I went to a water park in Japan when I was, 10, 11, and I was on the lazy river on an inner tube, and a group of teenage girls grabbed my tube and started touching my hair while I was in my tube.
Complete strangers.
Complete strangers. But they were, of course, like Japanese teenagers, and I was like, oh, they're so cool. You could touch my hair. But then when we went back, I was expecting everybody to comment on Matt's height. And
Yeah, because the average Japanese male
is about my
yeah, it's low fives. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think only one person commented on his height, and I was very disappointed by that. So I don't know if they have evolved like the U.S. is less inclined, seems to be more politically correct and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's part of it.
People
now
aren't putting
is,
themselves out there
Yeah.
as much.
But we did ask somebody for directions, and we were on a corner, and a guy gave us directions, and then we were about to walk away, and he's like, "You're so tall, man." And I was like, "Thank you."
But he's the only one. Matt's like, yeah, I've been like this for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. A funny story about Matt. He has been 6 feet tall since the 4th grade.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And his mom as well. His mom is 6 foot, 6'1". And she.
That's where he gets his height from.
Yeah. And his dad's about 6'1" as well. So they're both tall. And then his grandfather on his mom's side was also very tall. He was maybe 6'3", 6'4". So their whole family is pretty tall. Our wedding pictures are pretty comical. It's like his whole family, and then I'm at everybody's waist, like belly button height. Yeah.
And then when he's with you, he's a giant.
And then we also have this gigantic toddler as well. So
Is she going to be tall, you think?
oh, absolutely. She is 3 feet tall already. So she's 36 inches.
That's tall for a 2-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt was incredibly proud when we went for, I think it was like her 3 or 4 month checkup. And they give you the percentile or whatever for height. She was off the chart. She wasn't even in the 90th. She was beyond that. And Matt was just so proud. And we got to the car, and he called his mom and called his dad and told both of them.
They're not going to be short. Like
and they
Lyndee.
were all so excited, and I thought it was so bizarre. And I remember telling him, like, I'm right here. I can hear you.
Oh, that's amazing. Do they still do the thing where I was maybe 18 months old, maybe 2 years old? They'll say, "Hey, and we predict that your kid will be this tall."
And Matt's mom was telling us about that, where it's 18 months for girls and then 2 years for boys. And no one said that to us, but I remember noting that she was, I think she was like 33, 34 inches at that time. So I'm hoping, our hope is that she's not exceptionally tall, because we both have to go out of our way to find clothing.
Right.
So we hope that she is able to easily find clothing and not have to either go to the tailor
shop
or
like most people
or
do.
shop at Sears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too.
Or is there there's a big and tall?
Yeah.
Is there something for people that are not big? That are
That's another funny thing about Matt, is that prior to us dating, he had no idea that tall clothes existed. So he just looked like this massive kid that is like
3/4 sleeves.
yeah, exactly, and like these high water pants. But I introduced him to the finer things and showed him which brands have talls, because I shop in their petite section. So
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
There, Okay, so there are places that have
Yes.
petite sections for sure. I've never had to worry about that personally. All right, so you're leaving Minnesota in the fall. What year was this?
2010.
Okay, so 2010. You're leaving Minnesota. Where do you end up when you left Minnesota?
Well, I didn't really have anywhere to go, so I went back to my parents' house, and I was not very pleased to move back in with my parents, because I had just spent 2 years living what I thought was the adult life. And so I lived there. I lived with them for about 6 months, and I started working in a restaurant. And then Matt and I met, and we were dating for a while. I guess I lived there a little longer, because when I left there, Matt and I moved in together after about a year. Yeah, so that was 2012. Yeah, so that's kind of funny.
How did Matt propose? Or did you propose?
I pretty much showed him exactly what ring to purchase.
Oh, you planned it all
what
out.
he should say, where we were going.
Follow
and
these
then,
17 steps. And
exactly.
we'll be fine.
And this is a good example of our relationship and our personalities. I'm much more opinionated. Actually, it was really sweet. I was studying abroad, so I went to school a little bit later. I went to VCU when I was 23, and I graduated when I was 26. And I studied abroad the summer before graduating in Florence, Italy. And
that had to be amazing, right?
It was absolutely amazing. My grandmother, who I was very close with, had passed away earlier that year, and the funny thing about when somebody dies is life just keeps going on. And so it always reminded me of like the Mario screen where it keeps moving and then you have to like keep up with the screen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my grief felt. And so I thought, it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to go to Italy. I just wanted to like not have to work or do work and school. And I was kind of just looking for an escape to get my feelings sorted out and all of that. And so I went to Florence, and it was an amazing experience. It was 6 weeks, so it was pretty short. It was just a summer semester. But it was nice living somewhere and getting to know the streets and know where you're going and see a country and all of that. And I've always loved travel. So to how he proposed after I studied abroad, Matt met me overseas. We met in Venice, and we did Venice, Barcelona, and Paris together. And because he's a terrible liar, or he didn't even lie, he just like can't conceal anything either.
He'd be really bad at poker.
Exactly. I remembered the day before he was supposed to fly out and meet me, the ring that I had wanted was at a jewelry store at the mall in Short Pump. And we had looked at rings a couple months prior, and I was asking him what he was doing, if he was all packed. And he's like, yeah, I just have to go to the mall first. And I was like, you never go to the mall. What are you doing at the mall? And then he was really weird about it. And I was like, we're getting engaged. And this was like, what's funny too, is at that age, it just, not that I wouldn't do it again, but at that age, it just feels so big and like the next step.
It's a huge step.
It's a huge step. But in retrospect, I would be totally fine doing what we're doing now without all of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's just kind of funny how big of a thing that feels at that age. And so I knew he was coming with the ring. He was
coming overseas with the ring.
He was coming overseas with the ring. And we went, the first night that we met, we went and had the most amazing dinner. And then there were like 3 other nights in a row where we had amazing dinners. And I was just
like, which one?
Sitting there.
Good for him for not doing it right away.
And yeah, that's also a good representation of Matt. And so we were getting on the flight to go to Barcelona, and he was really nervous. And he confessed to me that he had the ring in his pocket, but he was worried that it was going to set off the metal detector. And I was like, are you going to propose right now? And he was like, no, that's not going to be our story. And I was like, okay, good. But like, now I know that you do have that. So we went to Barcelona, and there was a restaurant that was just absolutely gorgeous that we went to. And we walked in. As soon as we sat down, they brought over a bottle of champagne and like a bottle of champagne. And then there's a piano player, and he was playing like all of my favorite songs. And then he started to play our song, which is Queen Best Friend. And I was like, this is it. This is happening. And I looked over at him and I was like, don't be nervous. Just go ahead. And he was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't bring the ring. And I was like, you paid them to play this song and bring us champagne, and you didn't bring the ring? What happened? Did you lose it? And he was like, no, that's just a coincidence. I don't know why they're doing that. And he was like, but I acknowledge that this would be a really good time to propose. But we had taken, I'm going to butcher the name, Las Ramblas Boulevard or whatever.
Okay.
And I guess it's like a highly pickpocketed area. And he had read that somewhere online, and he was like, I don't want to lose the ring. So he didn't bring it.
He's being practical.
Again, Matt. And so the next day, he plans an excursion for us outside of Barcelona. We go up the coast about 45 minutes, and it was the coolest little beach town, an old castle fortress type thing. Hung out on the beach, and then later we were hiking up this fortress. He keeps walking, and then he'd occasionally stop, and then I kind of figured that was what was going to happen, or that was his plan. And so we finally made it to the top, and he found a really pretty spot. And he looks over, and there's another guy proposing at that same time. And so he's like,
poor Matt.
Yeah. And so we had a drink at the restaurant at the top, and we started walking down. And then finally at this like very nondescript place, he just kind of like stops and proposes. I have no idea what he said. I just remember thinking the whole time he was down on one knee and we were eye level, and just thinking like it was very, very odd that we were eye level. And so that's what I thought about the whole time. And I'm not even sure if I said yes or what words he said, but that's our love story.
That's cool. That's a great story.
When we tell the story of how we got engaged, our story tends to revolve around all the great opportunities there were to get engaged, and less about like the actual engagement.
Yes, it's a great story. And out of Venice, Barcelona, and Paris.
Then Paris, yes.
And I've actually never been to any of those places, but what I know of those places, I think Barcelona is the way to go.
I liked Barcelona a lot. I am the planner in the relationship when we go on trips. Neither of us are over planners where we want to see everything and do everything
and be exhausted.
That's not really our MO. But I do like to put a lot of effort into figuring out like one place to see every day, and then find the best restaurants and like the best drinks. And we spend most of our time on trips eating and drinking. And so I didn't have an opportunity to put as much effort into that trip. And what's funny too is that was like our first big trip together. So it was funny to see how we both traveled. Matt is very much a show up and wing it. And if you don't see it, like, go back another time.
I'm with Matt.
I am not. I feel like I am wasting money if I do that. And I get so anxious and upset. So we probably didn't take the most advantage of Barcelona, but Paris was wonderful. We had not a lot of plans for Paris, but it was a little bit easier to navigate, and of course, like you kind of know the top 4 places that you want to see without doing much preparation.
It's a very romantic place too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been wrong to ask you there.
Yeah, and Venice as well. We didn't really have a plan in Venice, but we just kept walking, and then we would find a bar and then stop for a drink and eat, and then find another, just keep walking. Like, I don't know how many times we got lost or how we made it back to our Airbnb, but that in itself was an excursion on its own.
Venice is a unique place.
Venice is crazy. Venice is just mind-blowing that exists in the same world as like Richmond.
Right.
It's cool.
The whole place is on top of water, right? Just about the whole
Absolutely.
place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy to see these low gondolas floating by, and there are definitely waves in some of these canals and in the bigger canalways, and it looked terrifying to go in a gondola. I wasn't sure how that was something romantic, and I remembered Matt later saying that he had thought about proposing on a gondola, and he was like, no, I would absolutely drop the ring into the water. Like, no.
So you went on a gondola though. You had to, right?
No.
You never went on one?
No, we didn't.
You were in Venice.
Yeah. I would definitely. So there were some really cool other boats. Like, they're not speedboats. I don't know anything about boats, but like the wooden cabin.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah. Like 50s, 60s.
When I think of those boats, I think of Italy.
Yeah. I would go on that in a heartbeat. Gondola.
Did you go on one of those?
No.
So you didn't go on any watercraft?
Yeah, we were pretty broke at that point. I was in school. I was working. My money went towards school and staying alive. And Matt was in his first, maybe his second job at that point. But yeah, that was definitely our pinching pennies, save your money, be responsible kind of phase. So
yeah, I understand.
Traveling on a budget, yeah.
When you were in school, you were studying
interior design.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have my bachelor's of fine arts from VCU in interior design.
A BFA, right?
BFA, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And did you enjoy VCU?
I did.
It's known for...
Yeah, it has an amazing art program. I am glad that I was living in the state of Virginia, just to reduce college costs at,
it's
at a
super
good
expensive
university.
out of state, yeah.
And it was an amazing program. It really changed the way that I analyze problems and I think through things. I really like how it just shaped my mind, and I'm really glad that I went from 23 to 26. So I did community college along the way prior to VCU, and so I only had to take 3 years at VCU. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
I've begged my kids to go live life. And I only have one that's college age right now, but I was like, hey, go do something else for a year or two, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then let's talk about college.
I definitely was more confident in what I was choosing as a major. I don't think at 18 I would have chosen interior design, and it's definitely something that brings me a lot of happiness now. And then I put myself through school, so I took it a lot more seriously. And I made it a point to, if a class was going to be several thousands of dollars, I was going to be in that class every time there was a class, and I was going to learn as much as I could. And I was always the kid at the end of the semester that sat down with every professor, and I asked them, like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Like, what can I focus on next semester? And I don't think I would have had the maturity to do that if I was 18 to 21, 22.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a point I make to my kids, but it's lost on teenage kids.
Yeah, it goes back to me as a teenager. You don't want to be told the right way.
And you also want to do what other kids are doing.
Yeah.
Right? And if most of your friends are going to college, you also want to go to college.
Yeah. So I was the opposite in that sense, where my friends were going to college and I didn't want to do what everybody was doing.
But you had a strong will, it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So what do you learn in interior design school?
So contrary to popular beliefs, it's not really about selecting paint colors and fabrics and stuff like that. It's a lot of programming. So you figure out who your occupants are of the space. It's pretty much interior architecture, figuring out who your occupants are, what their priorities are, what they're going to do in the space, analyze the things that they don't know that they need, and then working on a program for the space. And residentially, it's obviously much easier. Our program was focused on commercial work, so we did like hotels and hospitals and things like that. So it was figuring out how to allocate space properly. When you're allocating space, what's going to have the most ROI, and what kind of spaces you want to invest in versus which ones you don't need to. Maybe staff spaces don't get as dressed up as other spaces, especially if you're working on a restaurant or something. You're going to minimize the space that you give to staff for potentially hanging out or standing around. You want to kind of reduce.
Oh, wow. So it's very functional in that way.
Yeah, it's absolutely the functionality of design and how people use a space and how they operate in a space. And then the cool thing about design is if it's a good design, you don't know, you can't put your finger on it. Like if you're not
like good art.
If you're not a designer, you're like, this just works. It's simple. And that's really what design should be. You shouldn't have to think about it. It should have done the thinking for you, so you know exactly how to operate in a space, whether it's your home, your kitchen, or it's a hospital or wayfinding in a museum or something like that.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
It is.
And you really enjoy that.
I do. I like the puzzle aspect of it. I really love the puzzle aspect. I have always enjoyed people. I think that one of my strengths is being able to put myself in other people's shoes really easily and understand what their perspective is. And that helps me a lot in design. I think I'm a thoughtful person and an analytical person. So hearing what somebody says as being important to them and then being able to get to know them and determining other things that are good for them that they might not know about themselves.
Yeah.
So that's always really rewarding when you can do that in somebody, and you solve somebody's problem that they didn't know that they had.
So you graduated at age 26. What was your first job after that?
When I was in school, I took on a job at a local tile distribution company, and I worked in their showroom for a couple months, and then I was promoted and did sales for them. And I was with them for 3 years, one while I was in school and 2 after school. And I worked with builders in the local Richmond area, and would cold call them and do all that fun stuff.
Yeah. You're selling. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they came on and started working with us, I would either do the selections with the homeowners that they were building homes for, or I would put together like set packages and stuff like that they could then use for sales purposes on their end. And then I later went on to work with commercial firms selling tile to them. So all the local architects and stuff, putting together schools and hospitals and hotels, gas stations. There was one guy that was like Little Caesars, like that was his bread and butter. He did all the Little Caesars, and selling tile to those people. And then I completely left the industry and went on to the company we shall not name.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing experience too. And I think that really contributed to me going out on my own and eventually starting an interior design firm.
You started your own company.
Yeah. I had my daughter in 2019. I had a job that I loved at this firm, and an amazing team who made my pregnancy wonderful, who supported me very much, and before and after. But after having Winnie, I had a tough time with postpartum depression and sorting that out, and sorting out my identity as a person and as a mom. And I wasn't expecting that.
Postpartum is really tough, and it's hard for people to understand it that aren't going through it.
It is, and it's such a weird concept that if you hadn't gone through it before, then you wouldn't know it was coming. So I felt like I had all these grandiose plans for my career, and then you have a child and your perspective on life completely changes and your priorities change. And so in my sleep deprivation, I decided that it would be a good opportunity to completely quit my job and start a company from scratch. And in my head, I was going to spend 4 days a week at home with my daughter and work on Fridays. And not fortunately that COVID happened, obviously, because it is sad, but it definitely paused things and allowed me to pivot a bit. So my last day there was the day that the world shut down on March 13th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I had these leads lined up and these jobs lined up, and I was ready to get started. And it was just cold that Monday. No one was responding to me, and I was losing my mind. And it was 2 weeks in of being trapped in a house with an 8-month-old. And I was like, this is not
for the birds.
This is not for me. This is not fun. And so I immediately realized maybe 4 days a week isn't really like going to make me the best mom and Lyndee there can be. And so once daycare reopened and all of that, and actually my workflow picked up about a month in, and I have luckily stayed consistently busy since then. And so Winnie goes to daycare 4 days a week, and we have our girls' days on Fridays, and it is the best balance I could possibly think of.
That's great that it turned out that way. Are you a solo act, or do you have...
No, I'm a solo act right now. I still think I'm at a phase in life where I really enjoy what I'm doing. There's certainly a financial goal and different business goals that I have, but they're not focused on being the richest and the best. It's kind of focused on enjoying my daughter's life right now and this phase of life, spending time with Matt as new people, and as new parents, which sounds funny. Like she's 2 now, and I still keep telling people, oh, I'm a new mom. And then they'll ask me how...
Relative to me, you're a newish parent, for sure.
It still feels very new.
Well, and what you were saying earlier about every 3 months they've really changed.
Every 3 months she acquires a new skill, whether it's like rolling over, crawling, walking, like talking back, having opinions, wanting her boots.
Yeah. What did she say again?
So, yeah. Yeah, it's a good balance.
What kind of work do you do? Is it commercial, residential, both?
A little bit of both. I would say about 75% of my business is working with the builders that I previously worked at in my first job for the tile distributor. I kept in touch with a good bit of them and reached out to them and used my good old cold calling skills when I went out on my own. But the housing market is just booming, so
it's crazy.
So the builders that I work with, when they're putting together a spec home, I will select everything from the exterior siding, color scheme, and all of that, to flooring inside, bathroom tile, kitchen. Occasionally, if it's a renovation, I'll reconfigure the kitchens and the bathrooms and stuff like that to give a more modern flow to the house for a new, younger family or whatever. And then I'm also doing some residential projects that have been really fun just to work one-on-one with homeowners. And then I have a few light commercial. There's a hair salon in there, and some Airbnbs that are popping up soon.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So our listening audience can't see where we are right now, but we're in my house, and we're not going to talk about the entire basement, because the entire basement, frankly, looks like a 15-year-old who got into his parents' liquor cabinet, decided to throw things on the wall. So essentially what it looks like in here.
Yeah.
But from the couch right there over to this wall, and basically about where you are to that wall, what would you do with this space?
Well, I really enjoy the Finding Nemo art on your wall. That's a nice touch.
That is Belize.
Oh, is it?
A Belizean artist. Yeah, the frame costs more than the painting, which is kind of ridiculous.
No, it's still cool. I love getting art on our travels. I always make it a point to pick up a print or something funky to remind me of the places that we've gone together. In this space, I mean, you've got a podcast area, so I don't know if there's anything off the top of my mind.
There's this random wine barrel to your right.
Yeah, didn't you get that on one of our excursions? Like
that one is out here because it's so big I can't get it in the house. And I didn't figure that out until I got it to this door.
Yeah. I think another thing with interior design versus interior decor, it would really matter. You would want to start with how you use the space. So instead of just like throwing a bunch of shit that looks good in a space, like, how do you use this space? How is it working for you? Do you enjoy this table? Is this the right height for you? Is this the right size for the amount of people that sit here?
It is not.
Are there any other uses you would like to get out of this space that you're currently not using? Or how do you think you would use this whole downstairs level? Do you want to have flexible space to entertain more people or less people? Or is this like a guest space? Or
it's where we host the Super Bowl party.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
so
the women tend to go over there and the men tend to go over there.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, cool. I am very happy you joined. And I remember when you came up to me when we were at work together, you said, "Hey, I'd like to be on your podcast." I'm like, I don't even know what my podcast is about. What was in your head?
No offense, nobody wanted to be on your podcast, Paul.
Right, at the beginning, and now.
And then Lyndee told me that the other Lyndee told me that you had a podcast.
You were the only one for the first year or so that said, "Hey, I'd like to do this."
Yeah, it sounded fun. I love authentic conversations with people. I think that's why I like interior design, where I can quickly cut to the chase and say, okay, who are you? How do you live? What do you value? Who are the people you keep around you? And you can have really intimate conversations with people quickly. And so I like the same thing about the podcast. Like, you're not going to sit here and talk about the weather for an hour. Like, nobody's going to listen to your podcast.
So let's answer some of those questions. What do you value?
I value family. I value my time by myself to think and be creative, to rest. I value hard work. I'm a very motivated person. I think I still keep a little bit of that to myself, where I'm incredibly competitive, but I don't like to let other people know that I'm competitive. So then I can just like
that makes you even more competitive, right?
Yeah. So it's like
sneaky competitive.
What's the pool shark type thing?
What is it called?
Yeah, pool
Shark Tank.
No, pool like when you show up at the
you're
at the
a shark.
pool
Yeah,
and like you don't tell anybody, like
you play horribly the first
yeah,
game and then you take a raise money.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think of myself, at least professionally, maybe. That sounds bad. Please hire me. But yeah, I value hard work. I value creating things. I love to come up with ideas and see them through. I think that I'm really good at seeing potential in everything, whether it's people, friendships, spaces. And so it's really cool to me to put in the effort and see that come to life.
Yeah, very cool. Who are the people around you besides Winnie and Matt and now your sister?
Yeah, my sister and my brother are both two of my best friends. And my best friend Kristen lives in Chesapeake. I moved around so much that I didn't really keep in close touch with anybody I grew up with. And I met Kristen when I was 20, and she would buy me, and she was a year older, so she would buy me booze at the Walgreens across.
If you have to choose between a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old.
Yeah. And so she would buy me barefoot Pinot Grigio at the Walgreens across the street from the restaurant that we worked at. And then we'd go over to her house and hang out. And she was like way more grown than the rest of us. She might be 2 years older than me then. But she got married when she was young and is still happily married to Adam. But Adam was in the military, and so he was gone often. And we were all like 20, 21, and she was the only one that like owned a home. And it was totally wild that she owned a home, and the rest of us like lived in crack dens. And
Not literal.
not literal, but just
maybe give that impression.
Yeah, nothing glamorous. So everybody loved hanging out at her house, and her and I have been best friends, I guess 10, 12 years now.
How often do you see each other?
She probably a couple times a year. We talk every day. She was there when
Every day,
yeah. She was there when I gave birth to Winnie. It was Matt and Kristen. So
she got to be in the room.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun.
And she has kids too?
She has kids too. She's got Patrick, who's 8, and Elliot, who's 5. And it's been awesome to see them grow up. They are super cute. Yeah, they called me Cindy for like the first 5 years, which I thought was weird. And I asked Kristen one time, like, how do they even know that name? You guys don't know any Cindys. And she's like, oh, Cindy Lou Who. They think you're Cindy Lou Who. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I won't correct them.
And it does rhyme.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where does the name Lyndee come from?
My mom said that she got a package when she was pregnant, and it was from her friend, or it was supposed to go to the neighbor, and the woman's name was Lynn, and her last name was D. And
like
so
D-E-E.
Just the letter D. So they didn't spell out her last name. And so she just read it through quickly and liked it, and then they named me the phonetic spelling of Lyndee.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you and I also know another Lyndee.
We do. That was really exciting when she came to work with us. So I was on vacation when she started at the company, and I had gotten a notification on LinkedIn, and it said, hey, a new person is working at this company. And I looked at it, and it said Lyndee. And the picture was small, and she had brown hair, and she looked like a petite female as well. And I had this weird moment where I was like, did I get fired? Like,
They're replacing me with somebody who has the same name.
I was so confused, and for a second,
they've replaced me with my near twin.
Yeah, I may have been drinking because we were on vacation, but I remember thinking, is this me? Did my name get spelled incorrectly? Who made this account? And then I later met her, and then when I went to interview for an internal position and meet her in person, we are roughly the same height. She's on... I think we're the same height.
I think you're the same height, yeah.
But she's probably like, no, I'm 5'9". What are you talking about?
That's pretty good impersonation.
And her and I were wearing like the exact same dress.
Oh, that's
it was
amazing.
The funniest thing.
Yeah, y'all are similar size. And same
and I was just like,
name
so can we be best friends now, or should we wait a little while? Like, you let me know.
And she's Lindy.
Yes.
Yeah, good times. All right, so what do you do in 10 years from now, you think?
I don't know.
Do you even care at this moment what you're doing 10 years from now? Are you
a
planner in that way?
No, I'm absolutely a planner in that way. I have business goals for myself and goals for my family and my relationship with my husband and my daughter and my extended family. But I also think that I recognize that 10 years ago at 21, I never would have pictured anything about my life now. I could have never come up with Matt in my head or my daughter or my home or my career path. So I have rough plans. I feel like I'm an ambitious person, but I also leave a lot of room for life to happen because it's just going to.
Yeah, there are a lot of forces that you have zero control over.
Absolutely.
You hope to have some influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I certainly don't want to live on autopilot, but
that's boring.
Yeah, but things happen, and that's cool too.
All right, how old is Winnie when she listens to this?
I don't know. So I was also thinking about that. Are podcasts going to be a thing in like 10 years? Because my parents have so many home videos of us on VHS. I don't have a VCR.
Wow. I think because it's on the internet and you just click on a link or a button or whatever, it'll be around for a while.
Then in that case, she'll probably be 5 and like have her own podcast or something like that and be making fun of this one that I'm doing.
And making fun sounds. Maybe she's not making the fun sounds.
Yeah, hopefully she speaks a little more clearly.
She can pronounce boots.
Yeah, more people can understand her.
So if she's 5 when she listens to this for the first time, is that your sincere guess? She's 5, you think? Or do you think she's going to be older?
No, she'll be older. I keep a baby book for her as well that I hope to give to her when she's 18, 20 or so. And the baby book isn't so much like, oh, you're crawling now, but it's talking about kind of what Matt and I are doing in our lives, what it's like to be a parent, and to share that perspective with her. So I hope that
will the podcast make the baby book?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll like sew in a folder for like a USB drive or something.
Oh, that's really creative.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so she's going to be a little bit older. Let's say she's going to be 12.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell the 12-year-old version of your daughter?
I love you. No, it's really important to me that everybody, whether you're a child or not, gets to be the person that you are in your being. And in your natural self. And I have no desire to persuade her to be anything other than that person. And so I hope that she always has the confidence to be everything she wants to be. But I do hope she's a little weird. Matt and I are kind of weird people, and have a weird sense of humor. And I hope she can keep up with that. But other than that,
I have a feeling she can.
Yeah, she's already pretty weird.
And by the way, everything you just said was really well said.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's very cool. Well, it was great having you here tonight.
You.
We're at like an hour, 12, hour 13.
Okay.
It's a great length, and I'm really glad you joined us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.